Hello, my name is Avananda. I've been teaching yoga around the world for over 30 years, sharing my blessings by offering free yoga classes, currently on the most beautiful beach in America, here in Siesta Key, Florida. Furthering my collaboration to raise personal and planetary consciousness, I now present Beyond the Matrix, a program in which I have thought-provoking conversations with authors, scholars, teachers, and healers who are on the cutting edge of ideas which will inspire, educate, and open our hearts to the multiple ways we can transform our world. Welcome to Beyond the Matrix, a show that explores the mysteries of life and empowers you with knowledge concerning your world and your being. SBNvideo.tv is your free thinking zone and the place to go for all things spiritual. Today our subject is astrology. There have been many surveys conducted over the past several years which prove that the belief in astrology is increasing despite repeated attempts on the part of skeptical movements to show the inconsistency of astrological thought as opposed to scientific experience. What is undeniable is that quantum physics reveals the non-separable nature of matter and thereby shows its ultimate indivisibility. This leads to the conclusion that each point in the universe is connected to all other points at the quantum level. Such a phenomenon seems reminiscent of the universal interdependence described by the ancients, and by which all the parts of the universe are in sympathy. A concept mirrored in astrology's insistence on universal interdependence. Now, we may have a feeling of some sort of psychic coincidence in relation to the arrangement of the stars and planets at our birth, but this is not due to the physical influence of the planets. Instead, to the fact that we are born in synchronicity with the universe and are entangled at the quantum level with its unique signature at our birth. Through his collaboration with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, the famous psychologist Carl Jung came to the conclusion that the unconscious is not limited to the domain of psychology, but rather is related to the structures of matter as well. Thus, matter and psyche are no longer two separate antinomic spheres. Their roots originate in a common original structure. Astrology draws from this source, and science, through its roots, shares the same soil. For the real history of science reveals how its founders worked from symbolic forms that rose from the unconscious. And as Carl Jung contended, we are born at a given moment, in a given place, and we have, like celebrated vintages of wine, the same qualities of the year and of the season which saw our birth. We have with us Tere Greenwald, an astrologer. She will help us to understand how astrology works. She's a gifted intuitive. She connects with guides and loved ones that have crossed over to bring information through to her clients. As a Reiki Master and a healing energy healer, all information is for healing purposes. Most clients feel calmer and more inspired by her readings. There is a connection to the universal life force principle, which honors all religions and belief systems. Both astrology and tarot
tarot cards are used to help answer questions her clients may have. But her formal education is in psychology, social work, and grief counseling, which provide a good foundation for her work in this field. Welcome to the program, Tere.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. I began again with my not so brief summation as to why I believe astrology works. I'd like you now to give us your take on why you think astrology works.
When again, my formal education being in psychology, spending time as a group therapist, case manager, working in mental health type settings, addiction type settings, and starting to see, and understand different diagnoses and the way that that tends to be handled or treated in those types of environments. And as I went further or deeper into the spiritual side of philosophy and deeper into the spiritual side of my own self, when I discovered the natal chart, it really helped me to understand, when you look at the planet Mercury, this is how somebody thinks and communicates. When you look at the planet Mars, this is how somebody takes action on something. When you look at Venus, you see what's their love style, and the moon rules how they are emotionally. You can see all these different parts of a person's personality right there on the map, the day they were born. Where was everything? It speaks volumes to that, and I can see even sometimes where people would have difficulty with emotional balance, which we diagnose as like bipolar disorder, and to what severity, you can see different degrees of challenges that people may face with that in an astrology chart. And it's just so descriptive of how they truly are, what they came into the world, so to speak, to be and work through. The framework, I guess you could say.
So it's sort of as if it were an ancient psychology, an ancient method of psychology, astrology.
Absolutely. It goes so far back in time. And you can actually look at, we look at the 12th house, and you can see even past life potential karma that also rules the house of karma. So it's interesting. You can take it on so many different dimensions in terms of what do you want to look at? What does the client want to know?
Where did it originate? Do you know?
No, I'm not really sure. It's
no,
been
I don't believe it has
so far back that I probably back in times where it wasn't even documented.
Yes, I understand that there have been very ancient bones that have astrological figures on them that are indicative that, in fact, it's prehistoric.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. People have been, and even when they look back at, quote, the wise men following the star, that again had to do with astrology. Not that I understand the full concept, but I was like, oh yeah, back in the day when there wasn't so much technology to try to navigate, people did rely on the stars, the planets,
and it was a part of science before the revolution.
Yes, getting more into the emotional side of things and deeper into it all.
Yeah. Well, the origins of life as well interested science before, as opposed to just the why, the how of it, as it is now.
Absolutely.
Well, let's then start. Could you tell the audience, please, what type of astrology readings that you do?
Yeah, I again, speaking to the natal chart, that is the map of the day you were born, where all the planets were. If we don't, we look at the birth time, because that's a common question. Why do I need to know what time I was born?
Yes.
It's a big circle, basically a big piece of pie with 12 slices. And the very beginning of that pie has to do with what time you were born.
Okay.
And that determines where everything falls in terms of the 12 houses.
Well, your birth is the moment at which you set out in your life, where destiny begins. Your destiny begins at your birth.
Right. And I haven't studied this role, in depth. However, when I look at my two children and their birth, their birth was their rising sign. They came into the world in the exact same way that would be their rising sign. And I found that really interesting.
You'd have to clarify that, I think, for the audience.
For example, one who is a Taurus rising, my younger one, okay? Taurus energy is interesting. It tends to be slow and solid. It doesn't tend to move quickly. It's plotted. It's one step at a time. So this was a labor that began the night before with, you know, some contractions and then Taurians sometimes, if you think about a bull charging, their symbol is the bull. At times, they may stop before they really shoot forward. And that was exactly what happened with my labor. Literally, we have this ongoing pattern, and then it stopped.
Yes.
And the next thing you know, came on, and within 4 hours, I had a baby. Time to charge forward. It was very Taurian-like.
Yes.
And he is a Taurus, and he's a true Taurus rising. He's not, by sun sign is not a Taurus, his rising sign is, and I can see those characteristics, and I can see it in his birth. So I found that really fascinating.
Since we're here right now talking about the rising sign, could then you explain a little bit to our audience about what a rising sign means in a natal chart?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. It's an important part of the chart. When you present yourself to people, when you first meet them,
yes,
how do you come across? What is that energy that comes forward? And again, that starts the wheel, your ascending sign or your rising sign, and then that speaks to the energy that rules sense of self.
And of course, there's 12 possibilities.
Right. 1 out of 12.
Yeah.
And so it's a very important thing. It tends to rule how you are socially. You see that a lot. And so sometimes people ask me, oh, you do astrology, guess what sign I am? I tend to have a difficult time with that until I can see somebody for a little bit, because what they're presenting is their rising sign. They're not presenting their sun sign unless their sun sign is their rising sign.
Right, right.
So
and sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is.
Coincidentally is
It
both.
is,
Right?
absolutely.
And what happens when it is?
They're just, you can look at some people's, in their natal charts, there's a smattering of planets in a number of different signs. They tend to be a little more chameleon-like. There's a lot of blending. They can understand where a lot of different kinds of energies and people come from, you know, because they have part of that in who they are.
I see, I see.
And at times, it's more concentrated. And a rising sign, when you have a rising sign and a sun sign being the same, it's a lot more concentrated energy of that particular sign. So you're going to see more of those traits or characteristics.
So they're more archetypically that sign, right?
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. So all right. So we start out. We get our natal chart. What if you don't know? A lot of people tell me they have no idea what.
I tend to put in the sun sign as the rising sign. Because when everybody looks up, you know, let me read my horoscope for the day, or, you know, Susan Miller, I want to read all about what's going to happen to me for the month. And
yes,
there's a lot of in-depth information, and most everybody can say, wow, so much of this is true for me. Okay? So what I've discovered to do, not all astrologers do this, but I put the sun sign as the rising sign. Because it will
When you don't know what their time of date
I will start
birth
it
is.
right. I will start it as that sign is their rising sign, whatever sign the sun is in. It really tends to be accurate in terms of that person understanding timing, because there is always going to be accuracy to that. Yeah.
when I've never really known the time I was born, but I had an astrologer who got to know me, and then sort of guessed, and then he defined each sign and each degree of it, and then I chose which one fit me the best. Would you recommend that as a means?
Absolutely, and that's an interesting subject to bring up. My boyfriend didn't know his birth time, and we go to visit his parents just recently. We've been together over 3 years. And so we just had assumed his sun sign was the rising sign. Samantha goes, oh no, you were born in the evening, somewhere between 7 and 9 o'clock, which totally changes the equation. Absolutely.
Right.
And I'm like, well, you weren't born at this times because you're not this sign rising, because I know you well enough that you're not that.
Yes. Yes.
So this is where you fall. And it just made so much sense. You know,
Well, it's
it was
interesting
more
because
accurate then.
it is so precise, in fact, that you can make this kind of deduction from knowing someone. You can deduce that this is exactly what their rising sign is, because it's usually the case.
Well, if you know your exact birth time, you can get very specific. That's what I love about astrology. It tells time and going into...
And you can use it predictively that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I read the transit chart readings, which is the natal chart in the middle, where all the planets were the day you were born, and the outer wheel is where the planets are now. So
the transiting planets means that which is going on right now celestially.
Right, and you can actually go back in time and put in a date. Sometimes people have certain experiences that they want me to look at what was happening then, or go forward in time. And you can put that into the computer and see, and it just speaks to timing. And if you know your birth time, you can see so many exact...
Isn't there another way to predict too, is with progressions?
Somewhat. The progress chart speaks a lot to a cycle in one's life that one tends to be in. I look at it as you see the natal chart, and here's another layer on top of it.
Yes.
That gets filtered in and added into the equation. And that's kind of how I see it. It's not 100%, but definitely there's a strong influence.
But tell us how that would work, how a progression would work.
Sometimes one of the biggest ways that I like the progress chart is, in astrology, we look at how the planets get along with each other. And that's called aspects. And it's basic geometry. If you have softer angles, 30-degree angles, 60-degree angles, when you have trines, which is 120 degrees, they're all getting along well. And that's why sometimes some days everybody goes, wow, this was a really easy day. And other days it just felt like, it was difficult. And that has to do with when planets are squaring each other. 45-degree angles is semi-square, 90 is a full square.
Yes.
It's a conflict. We have a natal chart that speaks to how did the planets in our natal chart get along with each other. And that has a lot to do with internal conflicts within ourselves that may be playing out, or internal blessings within ourselves. It just, certain things in our life just go so easy for us.
Yeah.
When you look at the progress chart, sometimes somebody may be in a cycle in their life. For example, relationship conflicts. If you look at that, that's Venus squaring Mars, or Venus semi-squaring Mars. That person is in a cycle in their life where they might find themselves bumping into difficulties in relationships. Male-female relationships. It could even be working relationships if it's a male-female situation.
I see.
But that is a phase. It's not the entire, it's a time in their life, a cycle in their life.
I see. So, although I am certainly understanding what you're saying, I was led to believe that you could take the day you were born and then progress it, each day being a year.
Absolutely,
right?
That's how they do it. Yeah.
That's how they do it. So that then you say, if you live to 50, then you go 50 days ahead, and you see the configurations there and where they. How do you relate it to your natal chart? Then you relate.
It feels like, to me, when I see it, the natal chart still is true.
Yes.
But this is a layer. This is a cycle in their life. And we know we go through these cycles. Sometimes we're having conflicts. Sometimes they're just not there. And other times, we feel like we're a bit of a different person. Different energies coming in for us to feel different about who we are, how we think about things. And that's where we see the progress chart. It's a cycle in our life. And
since the outer planets don't really change very much during a month or a month and a half, which would be what you would be looking at in a progress chart, about a month and a half in the future.
Right.
Then is it the moon that would be, which changes more frequently?
Yes.
That would be indicative of major changes in a person's life as you looked at a progressed chart?
Well, the moon is going to speak to their emotional state. Emotional and intuitive. So it's going to affect that particular part of them more. That tends to be what you're seeing. And also as we look at cycles in a moon, You know, a newer moon being the beginning of a new cycle, and a full moon being the completion of that.
Right.
And then there's almost a, you know, that relaxation or that time in between, and then a new moon comes again and a full moon. So, you know, it does speak to that. Like, is it time to begin something? Is it time to complete something?
And so, why don't we do this? It would be helpful probably if we could describe for our audience the houses and what they mean, because that's very important. When you say, oh, does it fall in your third house, fourth house, fifth house? Well, for someone coming into astrology who's new to it, this is really makes no sense to them.
Right.
So if you'd be kind enough to do that for us.
Absolutely. When we look at, again, our rising sign begins the wheel, the time we were born. Then there's the first house. And the first house is all about self.
Okay.
And it rules who I am, and it tends to be very personal. So if you have planets in the first house, you'll know that the focus, depending on the planet, is going to be on self.
Right, right.
Okay, so Mars, the action planet, would be an increase in energy.
I have Mars in my first house.
Okay.
So it's no wonder I'm athletic.
And it's always been that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yes, absolutely, I agree.
And then there's a strength for you in being able to do things alone.
Yes, I'm solipsistic.
And then the second house is going to rule money and assets, and more like physical assets, things that you have and own. And it also rules values.
Oh, personal moral values.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it can also rule values of things. You know, how do I, what is important to me? You know,
What do you value?
What do you value?
Now, do you take the sign on that house as well as the planets that are in that
Absolutely,
house, right?
Right.
And what
They're
if
both an influence?
Well, what
yes.
if a house is empty
Then
of any
that-
planets?
Then you would look at only really the transiting planets. And
But what could it be indicative of that a house is totally empty?
That really isn't something that's going to be a big focus for you, good or bad.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just not, there's not energy in there.
There's no energy in there. Okay.
Yeah, at least you didn't come into the world with that. There are times that planets are transiting it, but natal chart, no, there's nothing there. So,
And so the third house?
third house is going to rule communication, and it rules short-term travel, and it rules technology. We are in a Mercury retrograde, and Mercury is the planet that rules communications. So we tend to see
Presently, the Mercury's
currently
in
a Mercury retrograde. So we tend to see issues with phone service, internet service, any kind of
Yes.
technology. You're not supposed to buy a car. You're not supposed to buy a computer. It's a changing of your mind. So the whole, everything that
communication glitches, right, of
And
every
so
sort.
the third house is the communication house.
Uh-huh.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Does it rule anything else?
That's, it can, well, that also rules too, potentially like, what would you call it? Contracts, negotiations, things like that too. Yeah.
All right, good. Fourth house?
Fourth house is home and family matters.
Okay.
So
All right.
that rules land, property, houses. Realtors really maybe need to pay attention to that, or anybody who does anything with land. People look to that if
Your
they're going to make a
home.
move, your home.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it can rule family matters. Sometimes family issues are a part of, a big part of somebody's chart as well.
And fifth?
Fifth is going to be children, and fifth is romance, and it's the pleasures of life.
Okay.
So the fifth house is a really good creative house. It tends to be the fun house.
My son in the fifth.
Oh, am I going to meet somebody? Well, I look at what's going on in the fifth house.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
So-
I have a very full fifth house.
Yeah, that's really wanting to enjoy the pleasures of life and partaking
Yes.
a lot of energy in that.
Yes, yes. That's always been the case with me. So, sixth house?
Sixth house is going to rule day-to-day activities, your schedule, your routines. It can be work, but it's, again, more the day-to-day kind of stuff. And it also rules health issues.
Seventh?
Seventh is going to be partnerships.
Okay.
So it's a notch above romance, more solid partnerships. That can be business, and that can be romantic relationships, more like marriages, commitments. That's the seventh house.
Okay. Eighth?
Eighth is an interesting house. We call it the house of transformation.
Okay.
It rules higher finance, which is investments, inheritance, other people's money. And it also rules death, transformation, and the other side of the veil.
Okay.
So that is a very interesting house. It's one of my favorites.
A very eclectic little house.
Yes.
All kinds of things
And
in
we
there.
call it the higher finance house as well, because the second house is going to be money and assets, tangible, physical, tangible, and then the eighth house is going to be the higher finance house. And they are in opposition to each other, so it's kind of interesting how that works.
Oh, yes. Oh. And the ninth house?
The ninth house is going to rule higher education. It rules spirituality. It rules expansion and optimism, foreign travel, and learning new things, but not as much basic education, but really kind of higher levels, philosophy, anything along those lines.
So if someone had a very full ninth house, they would probably be very interested in philosophy and travel and foreign lands and just, or maybe just taking trips idea-wise.
I have 3 planets in the ninth house.
Oh, you do?
and moon and north node in the 8th house, so that's that intuitive part. You can see that a lot of times in charts too, their natural intuitive abilities. 10th house
mine's Uranus in the ninth.
That would be flashes of genius, like just waves of thoughts and information just coming to you.
Yeah.
Spiritually speaking.
And
the 10th house is going to be career.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we kind of have the day-to-day, and then we have the 10th house, which rules kind of the bigger picture, career matters. So, you know, there's also tends to be an identity attached to that a bit, too, when you look at career. So that's an important
One's identity is then...
At times people are...
Oh, because their career is often
when you
very
look
much
at
of their
day-to-day what I
identity.
do for work, that speaks different than somebody saying my career. I have a career as it's a different level that has to it.
And so the 11th?
11th is going to be friends and groups, networking circles, social crowds, all of that. So
Okay.
the 11th group is also fun. That's 11th house is fun as well, yeah. And the 12th house rules what we keep beneath the surface. So if the first
what isn't
house-
revealed.
what isn't revealed, or we reveal it when we're ready or comfortable. And we also
Our secrets.
right.
Right.
And 12th house can also be when I look to past life or karmic situations. The 12th house speaks volumes to that, because it's like this is coming back from the past. This is, you can see a lot of information in that 12th house.
So if you had a lot in your 12th, a lot of planets in your 12th house, what would that indicate?
That you're most likely working through a lot of karma in this lifetime, and typically a common theme, which this wouldn't be true for everybody, but a common theme is in other lifetimes. For example, if their Mercury, the way they think and communicate, is in the 12th house, perhaps in other lifetimes it wasn't safe for them to be able to say what they think and to be open and speak freely, because maybe they were killed for that, and some really potentially horrific things and unsafe things happened to them in other lives. So there's a reason why that is kept hidden until they feel comfortable or safe enough to reveal it.
I see. So that's wonderful. So we've gone through all the houses, and that pretty much, well, what it does is it really categorizes the aspects of life so that you can deal with them separately and logically then apply psychology towards those aspects of life. So it's I think it's a beautiful description, or a beautiful template, really, for one's life.
Absolutely, right. And when we look at the transits, people will say, well, what's happening? Romance is a common question.
Yes.
Well, if there's no energy, in the romance house, there's not going to be a lot of things going on there. If there's energy in the 11th house, which rules friends and groups, you may meet somebody, but you're going to meet somebody through your friends. So
I see.
get out there and socialize with your friends, and that would be the best way. That energy right now is that's going to bring that to you. It's amazing how it tells time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, if you're just starting and you look at your chart, and when I remember when I first saw my chart, I saw all these geometry figures,
It looks like
you know,
Greek, and
I
there's
had
geometry angles.
Yes, and you really don't know what to make of it all. So maybe if we could go just a little explanation as to what a conjunction and an opposition, because those are two major things in a chart. When you have a conjunction and opposition, both in the natal chart, that is how planets in your own chart, your natal chart, relate to one another, and also how transiting planets also relate through an opposition and a conjunction. If you'd be kind enough to explain that.
When, like I said, it's important to look at how the planets are getting along.
Yeah.
And there's basic geometry that's used to, everything has a degree.
Yeah.
It's very easy to measure. A conjunction would be when two planets are right next to each other. And typically with planets, if they're 6 degrees away, we consider that you're moving into a conjunction. You can start to feel that energy.
Mm-hmm.
With the sun and moon, typically astrologers take it out 10 degrees. That there's a beginning of starting to feel that energy. And of course, when it's right on, a degree right before that degree or a degree after, you're really feeling it. You're really, really in it.
So those two planets are in communication with one another, or they're
experiencing the energy, almost a combined energy of those two planets.
And so an opposition would be the opposite of that.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing.
One is across the chart from the other.
So there's no relationship, or as little as there could be.
Yeah,
right.
So they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, potentially, and sometimes it feels that way.
Within your own chart, then you can see why perhaps you don't have any feeling for a certain area. Other people are good with relationships, and some are not. And you can even find that through something like an opposition in your chart, right?
Right. Those born on a full moon, they're going to have the sun and moon in opposition from each other. They're going to come into the world with that.
Oh, because of course the moon at that point is far away.
The direct opposite, if they are born at the full moon.
Right.
So at times they may feel like their sense of self is in opposition with what they're feeling.
Right.
So.
And the only other things we have are the semi-square and the square.
Right. And that speaks to a semi-square is 45 degrees away. So you're going to feel that as a conflict. Somebody who has Mercury communication squaring Mars, they're having a hard time saying what they're going to do.
Okay.
Or people understanding what they're saying that they're going to do. There's a conflict with that. And so when you look at that, you're going to see that when people have Venus, when there's a Venus squaring Mars, you're going to see conflicts with relationships, male-female relationships.
And these beautiful symbols, aren't they? Literally. I mean, even the mathematics of it is symbolic.
Absolutely. It's sacred geometry, really, is what it is. And then the full square is going to be when they're 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And it's far more intense, that 90-degree angle. It's just the intensity is really there, and people are really, it's odd not to feel when something's squaring, one planet is squaring one of your planets in your natal chart. It's very hard not to feel that.
I have a couple of grand trines in my chart. If someone at home were also in that predicament.
Yeah, and it's such a blessing. Trines are always a blessing. That means that it's 120 degrees away. And it's just so synchronistic. And when we think about it, all of the earth signs are 120 degrees away from each other. It's just designed that the energies just seem to mix together well. And a grand trine would be, of course, you typically have a trine between 3 different planets, and that's what a grand trine is. So it looks like this triangle.
Yes, and it's right.
It's very nice
chart.
looking.
It's very nice looking. Yes, of course there's squares and other things.
Yeah, right. There's other things too. There always are.
But I'm thankful for the trines. Yes.
And there are times in our life when we're experiencing a trine in transit, and it's like, all of a sudden we just feel like we have more help, and it just got easier, and it's such a blessing.
It's a wonderful predictive tool too for people who are perhaps interested in how the outcome of a certain event, or maybe the project, or a job, and it's a wonderful way to at least give them an idea how the universe is cooperating energy-wise. So I would recommend very much for people to do some sort of investigation.
Oh, it tells you so much about yourself.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I love it.
And now, when you meet someone, would it be advisable to do a cross-chart comparison between you and that other person, be they a potential love partner, or just a friend,
even a
or
working relationship?
even a working relationship? You know, there are many more enlightened corporations that are actually, when they hire someone, they have a professional astrologer do their chart to see whether they would harmonize with all the people that are working there. So it's slowly but gradually, astrology is being recognized as a wonderful tool for all aspects of life.
Absolutely. You can definitely see compatibility. If you're looking at romance, you'll look at Venus. That speaks to what one's love style is. It's important that that's not in conflict, because then potentially the other person is not going to feel loved, because what feels like love to one person may not feel like love to the other. So that's very important in a love relationship. When you look at a working relationship or a romantic relationship, Mars, if 2 people have Mars squaring each other, there's going to be a battle of the wills over my way, no my way.
Yeah.
And who's going to win? But there will be a battle of the wills there.
So when you say that, so if a Mars
is action,
right,
a little bit more aggression, it's the male planet,
right,
the male energy.
And Venus is the planet of love.
And femininity.
And femininity. And so those two are the most important things you'd look at when you're looking at a cross-chart comparison.
I also would look at communication, like how can they talk to each other. It was a bit of an experiment, but I dated somebody where we had our Mercuries, which is, again, communication and how we think about things and how the words come out of the mouth and how they're interpreted. They were squaring each other, and I said something to him, and later he spit it back at me what he heard me say. And then it dawned on me, that's what he hears me say. This is never going to work. I just can't keep going there with this. It's just always going to be messy. And so I find that to be important for longer term relationships. You know, that's really key. And the moon's going to be about emotionally. Are they getting what they need emotionally? And that's...
But if you do a cross-chart comparison, even if there's harmony, what if the houses are, what if the planets are in various houses that might be problematic? Does that ever come up?
You see what houses, you're going to look at the degrees away from each other. You're going to basically look at that.
And not necessarily
and where the houses fall, that could be important too. If your sun sign, the day you were born, or your moon falls in somebody's 5th house of romance, that's really going to spice things up. If somebody has Venus trining Mars or Venus conjunct Mars, they're going to have really good chemistry in their relationship. And so you can see so many different parts of the relationship by looking at all of it.
And would you recommend that when someone meets someone, right, would you recommend them doing a cross-chart comparison right away, or waiting for things to unfold?
Well, I'm a Virgo, so I tend to be efficient. So I would want it right away, or I would maybe want to think, I don't know if I'm supposed to waste my time on this. Because, if there are, the other thing...
Most women are impulsive. So
I know, right. I don't want to say not to follow your heart, but it could be a difficult journey.
Yes.
And I look, too, when I look at somebody's chart, I look at the own internal, like the squares, the semi-squares, the trines in somebody's chart. If somebody's dating someone who has a Venus squaring Mars, and the other person does not have that in their chart, they're dating somebody who's potentially a relationship sabotager.
Ah, I see.
They'll never win that one. It'll be a very difficult relationship.
Okay.
And that part tends to be important to know. Sometimes if they're both in sync with it, they get each other, and it can work beautifully. But if one is so different than the other, in terms of that,
are a lot of your clients couples that come in to see what?
No, typically one or the other will come.
But not both.
Not usually, no. Usually one or the other. And tends to be the female checking out the male. But I do have a lot of male clients, and it's always funny because men want to ask about money and business first, and women want to ask about love first. So.
Yes. Well, what might be interesting, again, because I'm always worried about people who are just hearing it for the first time or have an interest in it. Most people are primarily interested in sun signs. That's what they know or would like to know.
Right.
So would you be kind enough just to go through the signs and give us a little character analysis?
One thing I like to do is sort of also talking about describing them and realizing that every sign has like a shadow part of it and a really light part of it.
All right.
And everybody
That would
is
be
such a mix of that. So
I think we have time to go through them.
Okay. All right. So let's start off. We'll start off with Aries. That tends to be the way, the chart starts. Aries is the first sign in the zodiac. Aries is a cardinal sign, which means they're self-starters.
Okay.
They're pioneering, and they tend to have a lot of energy. They don't necessarily need anybody with them. They're just going to go out and do this. They're the pioneers of the zodiac. When planets in a transit move into Aries, you see things just beginning. They begin, and they are the beginners of the zodiac.
Okay.
Aries tend to be about self-expression.
Okay.
So it tends to be about self. And at times, they're not always dialed into other people. Other Aries get that, right? Because that's how it should be. That's who I am, right? And but at times, that's kind of where you see a little bit of the dark side or the bad rap that Aries gets. The other difficulty at times with Aries is if they're starting things, do they finish? Or is it I get bored with it and I start something else? And then you look to other planets like where's Mars? Do they finish? Do they,
Yeah, well,
how is
it's
that
not
for them?
absolute. But these are broad characteristics,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
It's not that every Aries is absolutely this way, but it's just a sort of a large brush that paints
and
this
it's the
portrait.
Fire, it's the cardinal fire sign.
And the next one?
And the next one would be Taurus.
Okay.
And Taurus is they like beauty. They're known to be stubborn, but they plod and they're methodical, and there's such a groundedness. They are the fixed earth sign. Fixed means fixed. It's not as mutable.
Yes.
And so Taurus,
Stubborn.
stubborn. They tend to never lie. They're very loyal.
Yes.
They just tend to be all of that groundedness. Nope, it's this.
Yes.
But on the same hand, they're not going to just mold and melt themselves into something else. They know what they believe in, and this is true for them. And they also love beauty as well.
Oh, yes.
Taurians love beautiful things and
I have
places.
moon in Taurus, so I identify with that.
They tend to be, they like stability.
Yes.
They
do.
And sometimes other people really enjoy that about them, that they're stable. They provide that. Then we have Gemini. And
Yes.
Gemini is the big communication planet. They tend to be very intelligent. They love to chat. They're just very good.
Very verbal.
Very verbal. They can
and
be
quick,
very quick.
and very quick-witted.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And in Gemini rising, you're going to see that. Chat. Okay.
Yeah.
Geminis are an interesting sign because they have their sign is the twins, and they're like more than one person.
Yes.
So you really never know what to expect.
Yeah.
So
but
it's
that's
best,
what's so exciting about them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's best with a Gemini just to accept that as is.
Whoever shows up.
And when two Geminis are dating, it's always interesting because there's multiple people in there, different personalities coming out. And, it's always got to be interesting and diverse. And they love diversity, too. So that's a Gemini. A lot of times they'll have many different careers, and you'll see that, playing out with them. Then we go into Cancer. And Cancer, they are a cardinal water sign. Mm-hmm. And they tend to be the home bodies. Their home is very important to them.
Oh, yes.
They're kind.
They're very sensitive.
They're very sensitive. They're ruled by the moon.
Yes.
And they tend to care more about feelings and being sensitive.
They're maternal.
They tend to be very tuned in to people. Yeah. There's a part of them that can
they're
be
very
tuned
sweet.
In. Yes.
Next.
Okay. Oh, and the shadow side of a Cancer would be the moodiness.
Oh yeah.
Every sign has it. Then we've got Cancer, Leo.
Right.
And we're in Leo right now. Sun is in Leo right now. So we have creative people. They love to be adored.
Show business people.
Yes, they love to be adored. Larger than life, but again, just so creative. They have a warmth about them, and they like to spread that warmth. Yeah. At times they can be a bit prideful. That's where at times, again, the negative side.
Egoistic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they do love to be adored. A lot of times leaders are Leos.
Yeah.
That's not unusual. Our president is a Leo. We look at then Virgo. Virgos tend to be analytical about things. They are taskmasters. They like organization.
You're a Virgo.
I'm a Virgo.
Yes.
Things have to be in some sort of order. If it's too much chaos,
But they make great intellectuals, writers.
Oh, absolutely. There's a very creative side. They love to analyze. A memory like an elephant, most of them.
Yeah.
Which is why I do well with astrology, because there's so many things to remember. But it's just all stored in there, and I can access it.
If you don't want something remembered, don't say it. To a Virgo,
right.
Because 50 years later, they'll
I'm always the girlfriend saying, "Well, don't you remember that he?"
That's right. That's
and they're like, "Oh, I forgot about that." But whatever. That's the good and the bad of it. And
Libra.
Libra is going to be. They are cardinal air.
Yes.
And they tend to be very creative. They like beauty. And Libras want peace and harmony and balance. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they don't tend to remember things. It's a little more challenging for air, because if you think about information stored, if it's an air, it's a little harder for it to grab onto it.
Yes.
It's more etheric. It doesn't mean they're any less intelligent, because they're very intelligent, but it's just the concreteness of it.
And they can't make up their mind very easily.
If you wanted somebody to make up their mind, ask the Virgo, because the Libra's going to struggle with it. But they compare and contrast.
All right.
Oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And if you want somebody to present the other side of something, talk to a Libra. Oh, they're great about it.
But they're very aesthetic.
Yes. Yeah. Well, beauty. I mean, Venus rules Libra, and they love beauty.
They love beauty, and even when they're not very well educated, they're nonetheless, they come across as being very poetic. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Softer, more gentle.
They are
yeah.
And then we get into Scorpio. And Scorpios are the detectives of the zodiac. They want to know what's going on beneath the surface. Yes. They love to get into what's really happening here. It's a very intense water sign. It's the fixed water sign. Yes. On the same hand, they are not going to reveal until they're comfortable. Mm-hmm. So they're known as, quote, keeping secrets, but it's really just more of... if I'm not comfortable with you or this, it's not coming out.
Yeah.
So that, they have that sense of knowing when to hold back until it really seems ready for them. But if you want somebody to get to the bottom of something, it's a Scorpio's job.
Yeah.
They are great at it.
Yeah,
and not much gets by them.
No, very sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And when they come into a room, it's pretty powerful.
Right. It's an
Yeah.
intensity.
It's
an
intense.
smoldering
And sometimes
intensity.
people are a little too taken aback by that.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are uncomfortable around Scorpios, I've noticed, because they're so intense.
Well, it can be the same with Leo, and they square each other because it's so different. The Scorpio's got it all going on within, and most people can feel that. And the Leo's got it all going on outside.
Yes.
And not that they don't within, but that's where they put it and
see.
show it. So
I see.
they're really very different in how they present similar energy in some ways,
Yeah.
And then we look at Sagittarius.
Sagittarius.
The free spirits of the zodiac. They want to travel. They want adventure. They don't want to hang on to things really too much. They're just all about the adventure of it all. Kind of like the bachelor sign, so to speak, of the zodiac, you could say, because they tend to not want to be as committal.
Oh.
Because they want their freedom.
Yeah. Even within a relationship, they're concerned about their freedom.
They need
right?
to have their freedom.
Yeah.
Yes. That's
But
so
they're
important.
philosophers, aren't they?
Yes, they
Yeah.
have an incredible, optimistic view of
Yeah.
the world. They're just can be so optimistic.
Lighthearted, and they have very good sense of humor, usually.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
They're always enjoyable socially. Sagittarians
Yeah, socially,
are
they're
great.
Yeah, they are. The life of the party.
I'm a Sagittarius rising.
Oh,
so-
you are? Yeah. Well, that's a nice combination.
Yeah, it works
Sort of
for me. And then we go into Capricorn.
Yes.
And the Capricorns, they're like the builders, they are the cardinal earth sign, and they tend to be very solid, like a Taurian, but they're a little more of the builders kind of the zodiac. You'll see a lot of men that are in construction work or even own their own building companies, on a much larger scale that are Capricorn.
Yeah.
They tend to like to construct and build and do.
They're also CEOs of big companies.
Absolutely.
Right?
They have a very strong presence,
Yeah.
and they know
Power.
what they know.
Yeah,
and that's that.
they're
And they're
very
really not going to say
authoritative.
they're wrong.
No.
They may hear you and shift gears, but they're really not
But
going
they're
to say
great leaders.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
very
they're
strong
very
presence.
firm.
They are honorable, genuine, grounded.
Again, we're painting with a very large brush.
Absolutely.
So there are.
Right.
This is not to say that everyone who is any one of these signs is absolutely this.
Yeah, right.
But just as a,
There's parts of it.
That's right.
Yeah. And then
Aquarius are
yes, that will
wonderful.
come. Oh, Aquarians are futuristic. They think out of the box. They want to
Yes.
be to their own drummer. Don't
Yes.
tend to be
Another
traditional.
freedom lover, just like the
Absolutely.
Sagittarius.
And they just are not focused on the past. They're focused on the future.
Yes.
It's all about the future
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
So they tend to be incredibly creative
Mm-hmm.
and, thinking out of the box. They did not come here to paint on the same canvas as everybody else.
Yeah, I always think of the word quirky when I think of an Aquarian, because there's always something about them that's just a little bit, I don't know, a little unusual.
Right.
You know?
And they have no desire to be
They
in
have
the
no
pack.
desire to be usual, no, and they kind of flaunt it a little bit too, which is nice.
Yeah, and I remember an Aquarian friend of mine told me, well, efficiency is highly overrated. Like, okay.
And
I'm
then
sure she
finally,
is.
last but not least,
The Pisces.
The Pisces.
The Pisces.
I'm a Pisces.
And Pisces like to swim in the deep waters. They
Yes.
tends to be the more psychic sign. Everybody
Yes.
can have those gifts, but that tends to be naturally true for Pisces, that they have
And
this
I am.
intuitive ability.
Yes.
And they also can be quite sensitive
Yeah.
with people. They tend to be very dialed in
Yeah.
with people. And Pisces can be like a sponge, kind of able to absorb it all. And sometimes they have to be careful because maybe they don't want to take it all. Maybe it's not good for them to take it all in. But yeah, they tend to be a very interesting sign. If you want to have a really deep conversation with somebody, talk to a Pisces. They just love to go to
That's
it
true.
all.
The deeper, the better.
Absolutely. Pisces
I'm a
is-
deep sea diver that way.
Right,
Exactly. Yeah. The more the subject is a little bit outside of normal.
And they tend to all love metaphysics and being
Yes.
intrigued with it.
Oh, they all love metaphysics and poetry, and even
And it speaks to the
theoretical
heart.
physics.
You know, they love things that speak to the heart and deep. I don't think they're good at shallow conversation per se. That just doesn't tend to be something
doesn't
there.
interest them as much.
Yeah.
So they kind of snub their nose at it. You know? Well, good. We've done. You've done it. My word, all 12.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So somebody ought to identify some of their characteristics there. Now, you in your work, tell us a little bit about your work, how you work.
Someone will come to me. I usually will do both the transit chart, so it has the natal chart where the planets are now, and I will also do tarot cards.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I usually try to combine them. One of the things I find is people tend to be visual.
Okay.
So we can talk about an astrology chart and show them, but that's not something they can necessarily interpret or read. I find with the tarot cards, they can look at those, and there is a visual. Visuals are really important for people to hold on to a lot of times in readings. It takes it out of just auditory experience and brings it a little more into something they can integrate more into their being. So I love the